Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Daddy, why? Stay strong, baby.
I'm not dead. I'm still alive. Trust nobody. Those words weren't whispered in the shadows, weren't carved into the headstone, weren't even spoken aloud. They came buzzing into my phone screen as I stood beside my mother at my father's funeral in the middle of Detroit's Elmwood cemetery, while rain hammered down on black umbrellas and grief hung heavy in the air. I felt the vibration in my hand before I even dared to look at the screen, and when I did, I swear the world stopped. My heart skipped a beat, so hard I thought I might collapse right there on the wet grass. The text was from an unknown number, but it carried my father's voice, his phrasing, his urgency, the kind of thing only he would say. Now, before I dive any deeper, I need you to lean all the way in for this one, because what I'm about to tell you will shake you to your core. Do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and type your country in the comments right now. I want to know exactly where you're watching from, because this story, my story, is about betrayal, secrets, and survival. And I promise you, no matter where you are in the world, it's going to make you question who you really trust. Picture this. I was 21 years old, dressed head to toe in black, standing shoulder to shoulder with my mama, Zuri, as they lowered my daddy's casket into the earth. Only it wasn't really him in there. They told us his body was too far gone after the crash, burned so bad there wasn't enough left to even piece together. The casket we buried was nothing more than ashes swept from what little they could collect at the scene. That's what they told us, anyway. That's what the police said. That's what the fire department swore was the truth. But when my phone lit up with those impossible words, every explanation I'd been given cracked wide open. I remember looking across the grave at Omari, my godfather, Daddy's best friend since they were teenagers, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if I was staring at the face of someone I shouldn't trust. His tears looked real enough, streaking down his cheeks as he clutched a white rose in his fist. But so did the tears of every predator who ever played the role of family until their mask slipped. He threw the rose into the grave and made this big declaration in front of everyone. I promise I'll take care of your family like they were my own. On the surface, it sounded noble. But paired with the message glowing in my hand, trust nobody, it felt more like a threat than a promise. The rain didn't let up. It came down harder, pelting my skin until I couldn't tell if the water on my cheeks was grief or weather. My 3 little brothers, Jaden, Kingston, and Messiah, were clinging to Mama's skirt, their faces red and wet with tears. Mama was shaking beside me, trying to hold it together, trying to be strong for us. But I couldn't focus on any of it. All I could see was that screen in my hand. All I could hear was my father's voice echoing in my skull. I'm not dead. I am still alive. Trust nobody. I told myself it had to be some kind of sick scam. Some cruel stranger who saw the obituary in the Detroit Free Press and thought it'd be funny to torment a grieving family. But how would a stranger know to say it like that? How would they know the one phrase my daddy always repeated whenever things got tough? He used to tell me when I was little, Nova, the world is a dangerous place. Don't trust nobody blindly, not even me. Always keep your eyes open. That was his mantra. And here it was again, surfacing from beyond the grave, or maybe not beyond it at all. The preacher's words blurred into background noise. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. My cousins tossed lilies on the casket. My auntie sobbed so loud it echoed across the cemetery. But I was somewhere else, caught between disbelief and raw terror, trying to decide whether I should show Mama the text or keep it to myself until I understood more. Because if Daddy really was alive, if somehow he had faked his own death, then whoever killed him, or tried to, was still out there. And if he said not to trust anybody, then that meant danger wasn't far away. It meant the enemy might already be standing among us, wearing a suit and wiping tears off their face like the rest of the mourners. I didn't cry that day. Not because I wasn't broken inside, I was shattered into a million pieces, but because shock numbed me from the inside out. Grief and fear tangled together until I couldn't tell one from the other. I watched the casket sink lower into the ground, and in my mind I kept hearing the buzz of that message, over and over again, like an alarm that wouldn't stop ringing. When the service ended and people started drifting back toward their cars, I couldn't move. My shoes sank into the mud as I stood frozen by the grave, staring at the flowers piled on top, asking myself the only question that mattered. Was my father really gone, or had I just received proof that the nightmare was only beginning? Before you can understand the weight of that message, you need to know the kind of man my daddy was. His name was Legend Matthews, and honey, he didn't just carry that name. He lived up to it every single day. He wasn't a rich man, not by any stretch. He didn't drive a fancy car or wear brand new shoes every month. He worked for the city of Detroit, busting his back in the maintenance department, patching potholes, fixing busted pipes, digging trenches in the freezing cold when most folks wouldn't dare step outside. His hands were calloused, his boots had holes in them, and his body ached every night, but he always said he'd rather sweat through his shirt than let his family go hungry. That was my daddy, the kind of man who gave everything and asked for nothing. Our house on the east side of Detroit was small, 2 bedrooms crammed with 4 kids, hand-me-down furniture, and wallpaper that had started peeling years before. But to us, it felt like a palace. Not because of the walls or the roof, but because of what filled it. Laughter, warmth, and love so big it made the tight corners feel endless. Mama, Zuri Matthews, carried her own weight too. She had this gift, something you can't buy, can't fake, can't learn from no book. She could look at someone, study their eyes for 2 seconds, and just know what they needed to heal. Maybe it was peppermint tea for stomach troubles, chamomile for restless nights, ginger for the aches and pains that came with old age. She started mixing teas at the farmer's market, setting up a little wooden stand every Saturday morning with jars of herbs and handwritten labels. Folks came from 3 counties over just to see her, because Mama didn't just sell tea. She sold comfort, peace, healing. And every dollar she made went right back into the house. So we weren't rich in money, but in every way that mattered, we had more than most. And Daddy always made sure we knew that. Now, when it came to his friends, Daddy believed in loyalty with his whole heart. And there was one name that always came up, Omari Johnson. They'd been tight since high school, inseparable like brothers. Omari was the kind of man who lived fast and loose. He had a smile that could charm anybody, a laugh that carried across the block, and a hunger for life that Daddy admired even when it got him in trouble. They played football together, skipped school together, and when they became men, they worked at the same city department. To hear Daddy tell it, Omari was his shadow. If you saw one, the other wasn't far behind. When Daddy met Mama at a church social, Omari was the one in his ear, hyping him up to walk across the room and introduce himself. When Daddy saved up to buy Mama an engagement ring, Omari went with him to the jewelry store and helped him pick it out. When they got married, Omari stood at the altar as Daddy's best man, grinning like he was just as happy as the groom himself. And when I was born, Daddy honored that friendship by making Omari my godfather. That's how deep it went. That's how much trust Daddy placed in him. But here's the thing about loyalty. It can blind you. While Daddy was meticulous about money, writing down every bill in a little notebook at the kitchen table every Sunday night, Omari was reckless. He gambled on everything. Football, basketball, horse races, even dice games on the corner. If there was a bet to be made, Omari was in it. And when the bets didn't pay off, he'd show up on our doorstep, hat in hand, with some story about needing a loan. His lights were getting cut off. His kids, Amir and Zayden, needed new shoes for school. He just needed one more stake in a sure thing that would solve all his problems. And Daddy, Lord love him, always gave. I remember Mama's face every time Omari left with cash from Daddy's wallet. That little wrinkle between her eyebrows would deepen, her lips pressed tight. Legend, she'd say. How come that man always shows up here with his hand out, and you always give him something? He makes the same money you do, and he's only got 2 kids while we've got 4. How come he's always broke and we're scraping by just fine? Daddy would wave her off the same way he always did. Zuri, that's my brother. Family looks out for family. But the truth was, Omari wasn't family. He wasn't blood. He was Daddy's weakness, and he knew it. Looking back, I can see the pattern clear as day. Omari was always there, not just when times were good, but especially when times were bad. Every fight Mama and Daddy had, Omari knew about it. Every bill we couldn't quite cover, Omari somehow heard about it. Even the private conversations, the ones whispered at night after we kids were supposed to be asleep. Somehow Omari knew those, too. Daddy told him everything, every detail of our lives, and Mama hated it. One night when I was about 16, I asked her, "Why does Omari always know so much about us? How come he knows our business before half the family does?" She sighed and kept folding laundry, snapping the sheets a little harder than necessary. "Because your daddy tells him everything, Nova. And some things ought to stay in the family." "Have you told Daddy that?" I asked. "I've tried," she said softly. "But your daddy loves hard. He trusts hard. It's one of the things I love most about him. But sometimes, baby, it scares me too." At the time, I didn't understand. To me, Omari was just Uncle Omari, the man who brought gifts on my birthday, who laughed too loud at family cookouts, who called me princess like I was really his blood. But Mama saw something else. She saw the way his eyes lingered too long. She saw the way he positioned himself in our lives, not just as Daddy's friend, but as a shadow always waiting, always watching. And now, standing over that grave, with rain soaking through my dress and my phone burning in my palm with that impossible message, I realized Mama had been right all along. Omari wasn't just Daddy's best friend. He was the storm on the horizon, the one we'd been pretending wasn't there, the one Daddy defended no matter how much destruction it left behind. Maybe Daddy's blind loyalty was what killed him. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the reason he wasn't dead at all. To everyone else in Detroit, Omari Johnson was practically family. He had a permanent seat at our dinner table, a key to the front door, and the kind of casual authority in our house that only blood relatives usually carried. He was there for every milestone like he belonged. My first birthday party, my brother's christenings, every Christmas morning when the tree was lit with hand-me-down ornaments. He wasn't just Daddy's best friend, he was a fixture in our lives. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was Uncle Omari in truth, not just in title. But here's the part that still makes my stomach twist. The older I got, the more his presence stopped feeling like comfort and started feeling like a shadow. When I was little, it seemed harmless. He'd scoop me up at family barbecues, spin me around until I shrieked with laughter, call me princess, and slip me a dollar bill when Mama wasn't looking. But as I hit my teenage years, something changed. His eyes lingered too long when I walked into a room. His compliments shifted from "you're growing up so fast" to "you're gonna break some hearts one day." And the hugs. Lord, the hugs lasted a few seconds too long, his hand pressing against my back like he was reluctant to let go. Mama saw it. She didn't say much in front of Daddy, but I caught the looks. The way her lips tightened when Omari brushed my shoulder. The way she steered me out of the kitchen when it was just me and him. The way she told me one night, low and firm, "Nova, don't ever let Uncle Omari get too close. Smile, be polite, but always keep your space." At the time, I brushed it off. I thought Mama was just being overprotective. But deep down, I felt it too. That creeping discomfort. That sense that his presence wasn't just watchful, it was predatory. And then there was the way he looked at Mama. You know how some men look at women like they're trying to strip away their dignity with just their eyes? That was Omari. I'd catch him sometimes, his gaze locked on her when she was bending over to pull bread out of the oven, or when she laughed and her head tilted back, exposing her neck. The look wasn't one of brotherly affection, it was hunger. The kind of hunger no best friend should have for another man's wife. Mama noticed too. She told me once, after a Sunday dinner when Omari had lingered longer than usual, "That man don't see boundaries the way your daddy does. Legend might trust him with his life, but me? I wouldn't trust him with a glass of water." And yet, Daddy never saw it. Or maybe he refused to. Whenever Mama brought it up, Daddy dismissed her fears like they were paranoia. "Zuri, you're reading into things. Omari's been my brother since we were kids. He wouldn't cross that line. He loves me too much." But love is a tricky thing. Sometimes what looks like loyalty is really obsession in disguise. It wasn't just the looks or the lingering touches. It was the way Omari always seemed to know more than he should. He knew when Mama was behind on a utility bill before Daddy ever mentioned it. He knew when my grades slipped in school, even though only my parents and I knew about the report card. He knew about Daddy's overtime shifts, his side hustles, even the arguments that took place behind closed doors. One night, when I was about 17, I overheard an argument in the kitchen. Mama's voice was low but sharp. How come Omari knows everything that goes on in this house, Legend? How come he knows about my business, my health, even my dreams before I've had a chance to tell you? Daddy's voice rose, defensive, because I tell him. He's my brother. He listens when I need to talk. Mama snapped back. He's not your brother. He's a man who wants what you have, and you're too blind to see it. That was the first and only time I heard Mama raise her voice at Daddy, and it silenced the house like a gunshot. The bond between Daddy and Omari was like steel, unbreakable from the outside. But from within, it was corroding, rusted by secrets, by temptations, by a loyalty that wasn't mutual. Daddy saw Omari as his protector, his confidant, his other half. But Mama saw him for what he truly was, a vulture circling, waiting for the right moment to swoop down and pick apart the pieces of our family. And when Daddy died, or at least when we thought he died, that's exactly what Omari did. He swooped in like he'd been waiting all along. Looking back now, I realized that the uneasy bond was always there. It was in the way Daddy excused Omari's debts, in the way Omari inserted himself into our family's private life, in the way he looked at Mama when he thought no one was watching. It was in the way his arms tightened when he hugged me, like he wasn't just holding a goddaughter, but staking a claim. At the time, it was just a series of unsettling moments that we ignored, brushed aside, chalked up to that's just how Omari is. But in hindsight, it was the blueprint, the writing on the wall that told us everything we needed to know, if only we'd had the courage to read it. So when that text lit up my phone at Daddy's funeral, trust nobody, I knew exactly who those words were warning me about. Omari, the man who'd been in our lives forever. The man who stood at the grave with tears in his eyes and a rose in his hand. The man my daddy trusted more than anyone. The man who, deep down, might have been the reason Daddy died in the first place. The thing about funerals is that they don't end at the graveyard. Not in Detroit. Not in families like mine. After the prayers are said, and the casket is lowered, the grief comes home with you, fills your kitchen, spills into your living room, and sits heavy at the table like an unwanted guest. And that's exactly what happened the day we buried, or thought we buried, my daddy. The Matthews house became a revolving door of casseroles, pound cakes, fried chicken trays, and family members who hugged you too long and told you everything was going to be all right, even though it wasn't. And right in the center of it all was Omari. He moved through our house like he owned it. He greeted people at the door, took coats, poured drinks, and told stories about Daddy so loudly you'd think he was hosting his own memorial service. Legend was the strongest man I ever knew, he kept repeating, his voice cracking at all the right places. If I could live half the life he did, I'd call myself a success. But between those performances of grief, Omari was slipping into a new role. Protector, provider, head of household. I remember standing in the kitchen, balancing a plate of collard greens and cornbread that I didn't even want when I overheard him with Mama. His voice was low, smooth, reassuring. Zuri, don't you worry about a thing. I promised Legend I'd take care of this family, and I meant it. Whatever you need, money, food, protection, you call me first. You hear me? You don't have to carry this alone. Mama nodded politely, but I saw the tension in her jaw, the way her eyes flicked away from his too intense stare. Thank you, Omari. We'll be okay. God provides. But Omari didn't back down. He stepped closer, his voice dropping even lower. God helps those who help themselves. And right now, I think he sent me to help you. I wanted to scream right then, to tell him I knew, that I had the message, the proof that Daddy wasn't gone and that Omari wasn't the savior he pretended to be. But I couldn't. Daddy's warning was clear. Trust nobody. And if I blew the whistle too soon, I didn't know what Omari might do. As the evening wore on, I noticed how he lingered near Mama, shadowing her like he used to shadow Daddy. Every time she tried to step away, he found some excuse to pull her back in, a question about bills, a compliment on her cooking, even a hand on her shoulder when she looked tired. And each time, Mama stiffened, but she didn't push him away. She couldn't. Not with a house full of mourners watching, not with the weight of financial ruin pressing on her chest. And that's when the red flags started piling up. First, Omari began talking about our mortgage in detail. He mentioned the exact amount of the last payment, the interest rate, even the late fee schedule. My blood ran cold. How did he know that? That was information only my parents should have known. Mama's eyes widened, too, but she covered it quickly, nodding like it was no big deal. Legend, and I talked about it, Omari explained smoothly. He told me everything. Wanted me to be prepared in case something happened. Prepared. That word hit me like a hammer. Second, he brought up life insurance. Loud enough for half the living room to hear, he said, "It's a blessing y'all had that policy in place. At least the kids and Zuri will be taken care of." He looked at Mama while he said it, but she quickly excused herself to refill the tea. I knew, and she knew, there was no policy anymore. It had lapsed 6 months ago, which meant Omari was fishing, testing, seeing what story he could sell. Finally, toward the end of the night, when most of the crowd had trickled out and the house was quieting, Omari made his boldest move yet. He sat in Daddy's recliner, his recliner, leaned back like it was his throne, and called out to us kids, "Come here, y'all. Let me tell you something." We shuffled over, hesitant, but we obeyed. His eyes swept across us, lingering on me longer than I liked, before landing back on Mama. "Your daddy may be gone, but I'm still here. And I promised him I'd look after you. So from now on, when you need advice, when you need discipline, when you need a man in this house, you come to me. Understand?" The silence was suffocating. My brothers nodded slowly, too young to understand the danger in his words. Mama stood frozen in the doorway, her face a mask of grief and fury she couldn't show. And me, I clutched my phone in my pocket so tight my knuckles ached, praying another message would buzz through, praying Daddy was still out there, watching, guiding. But no message came. Not that night. Not while Omari sat in Daddy's chair in Daddy's house, speaking like he was already halfway to replacing him. When the last guest left and the house finally emptied, I thought Mama would collapse. Instead, she pulled me aside, her voice a whisper. "Nova, did you see the way he acted tonight?" I nodded. Her lips trembled, but her eyes were steel. "He thinks Legend's death made room for him. He thinks this is his chance. But he doesn't know us. He doesn't know me. We're not his to claim." And as I stared into her tired, tear-streaked face, I realized something terrifying. Omari wasn't just moving in on our grief. He was moving in on our lives. And if Daddy's message was real, if he really was alive somewhere, then Omari was the reason he had to vanish in the first place. The night after the funeral, the house felt like a hollow shell. All the casseroles and sweet potato pies had been stacked in the fridge. The relatives had gone home, and the only sound was the faint ticking of the old kitchen clock. My brothers were huddled in their shared room, crying themselves to sleep. Mama sat in Daddy's recliner, her hands wrapped around his work jacket like it was the only thing tethering her to the earth. And me, I couldn't sleep, not with that message burning in my memory. I kept replaying it, staring at my phone screen in the dark like answers might crawl out of the pixels if I looked long enough. I'm not dead. I am still alive. Trust nobody. It didn't make sense. My father's phone had been destroyed in the crash, they said. His body gone. So how could this be? I was halfway to convincing myself it was some cruel prank when it buzzed again. The vibration rattled across my nightstand, and when I picked it up, my hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped it. "Stay strong. Help is coming. Keep watching Omari." That was the moment I stopped doubting. Because nobody else would have told me to watch Omari. Nobody else would have known to point my suspicion right at him. And the phrasing, "stay strong," those were Daddy's words. He said them to me before every exam, before every doctor's appointment, before every scary moment in my life. I could hear his voice as clear as if he were standing in the room beside me. I crept into the living room, where Mama was still awake, her eyes red but unblinking, fixed on some distant point across the room. "Mama," I whispered, holding out my phone. "Look." She squinted, and when she saw the words, her whole body stiffened. She covered her mouth like she might scream, then forced herself to breathe. Lord have mercy, she whispered. It's him. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't just tears of relief. They were mixed with fear. If Daddy was alive, that meant his death had been staged. And if it had been staged, that meant someone had tried to kill him. Someone close. Who else have you told? She asked sharply. Nobody, I said. Just you. Good. Keep it that way. She closed her eyes and gripped the jacket tighter. If he says don't trust nobody, we listen. We wait. We watch. From that night on, everything changed. Every word, every gesture, every smile in that house became something to decode, a puzzle to solve. Especially when it came to Omari. He didn't wait long before reappearing. The very next morning, he was on our doorstep with groceries, eggs, milk, cereal, even snacks for my brothers. He walked in like it was his second home, setting bags on the counter, smiling like he was the savior of the day. Thought y'all could use a little help, he said, looking straight at Mama as if daring her to refuse. Mama forced a tight smile. Thank you, Omari. That's thoughtful. But when his eyes flicked to me, something dark passed through them. You look tired, Nova. Been crying all night. I froze. How did he know I'd been awake? How did he always know so much? Later, while Mama put the groceries away, Omari leaned against the doorframe of my room. His presence filled the doorway, his voice low and sticky. You know, your daddy was like a brother to me. Losing him, it's tearing me apart. But don't you worry. I'll make sure you're taken care of. You and your mama both. I went to scream at him to get out. To tell him I knew he wasn't here out of kindness. But instead, I nodded, forced a polite thank you, and waited for him to leave. That night, another message buzzed my phone. Don't let him corner you. Don't let him win her trust. I'm coming soon. I stared at those words until my eyes blurred. Relief washed over me, but it was laced with dread. Because if Daddy was alive, then where was he? Why couldn't he come back now when we needed him most? And why did every word he sent make Omari look less like a friend and more like a predator circling closer to his prey? Mama and I began to operate like conspirators. We spoke less, observed more. Every time Omari dropped by, which became more frequent, we cataloged his actions. The way he asked about bills he had no business knowing. The way he started giving my brothers advice on school, on chores, on how a man should act. The way he inserted himself into every conversation, always steering it back to how much we needed him. But the scariest part? He was careful. To the outside world, Omari looked like a grieving best friend stepping up to honor a promise. To us, he was something darker, a man rehearsing for a role he wasn't meant to play, inching closer to taking my father's place. And with every passing day, I realized Daddy's messages weren't just warnings. They were instructions, orders, a roadmap for survival until he could come back and finish what he started. But what if he didn't make it in time? What if Omari made his move first? Grief has a way of cracking open every weakness in a family. For us, the first crack was money. Daddy's paycheck had always been steady, enough to keep the lights on, the mortgage paid, and food in our bellies, even if we never had much left over. But without him, it felt like the bottom fell out overnight. Mama's herbal tea business at the farmer's market brought in a little cash, but it wasn't nearly enough to cover the bills of a household with 4 kids. The mortgage statement sat on the counter like a loaded gun, past due notices arriving in red-stamped envelopes that piled higher every week. I remember catching Mama late at night, the kitchen table lit only by a lamp, her hands shaking as she flipped through those envelopes, whispering prayers under her breath. And just when it felt like we were drowning, Omari showed up with a lifeboat that looked more like a trap. He always arrived at the perfect moment, groceries in one hand, envelopes in the other. You don't need to worry about the bills, Zuri, he'd say, laying down cash or flashing receipts. Legend told me everything about this house. I know what you owe, I know the schedule. I've got you covered. At first, Mama resisted. She'd square her shoulders, lift her chin, and say, "Thank you, Omari, but we'll manage." But Omari wasn't the type to take no for an answer. He'd sigh, shake his head like a man burdened with responsibility, and reply, "Zuri, you've got 4 kids. Pride won't pay the mortgage. Let me do this." For legend, the way he said Daddy's name made my skin crawl, like he was invoking a blessing he had no right to claim. The worst part? He wasn't wrong. Without his help, we would have fallen behind. The bills were too heavy, and Mama was too proud to ask for charity from the church or extended family. Omari knew that. He counted on it. Every dollar he dropped on the table tightened the rope around our necks, binding us to him. And then came the life insurance blow. One evening, Omari leaned back in Daddy's recliner, his favorite place to perch, and casually said, "It's a shame about that policy lapsing." Huh? Legend was always too busy taking care of everyone else to take care of himself. But don't worry, Zuri, I've got savings. I can keep this house afloat. Mama froze. Her eyes darted to mine, and I knew what she was thinking. How did he know the policy had lapsed? That wasn't public knowledge. That was private between her and Daddy. Omari leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice dropping lower. You don't have to struggle. There's an easier way. If we joined our lives, if we made this official, you'd never have to worry again. You and the kids would be safe, provided for. The words hung in the air like poison. Mama's face went still, her expression carved from stone. She didn't lash out. She didn't scream. She simply stood and walked into the kitchen, leaving his proposal unanswered. But I saw the tremor in her hands as she gripped the counter, the way her body shook once she was out of his sight. From that moment, the shift was clear. Omari wasn't just circling us anymore. He was moving in for the kill. He started dropping hints in front of other people. Neighbors, family friends, even our pastor. "I'll always be here for Zuri and the kids," he'd say with a sly smile. "We're family now." Some folks nodded approvingly, buying the act, while others gave Mama pitying looks, whispering about how maybe it was meant to be. The trap was closing, and he knew it. I remember one night, after he left, Mama sat me down at the kitchen table. Her voice was low, urgent. "Nova, do you understand what he's doing?" "Yes," I whispered. "He's trying to replace Daddy." Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "He's trying to own us. And if I push too hard, if I make him angry, he'll take away what little help he's giving, and we'll lose everything." But if I give in, if I let him too close, she couldn't finish. She didn't have to. And that's when my phone buzzed again. "Stay sharp. He's not just after her. He's after you, too." The blood drained from my face. I showed Mama the message, and she closed her eyes like the weight of the world had just doubled. "Then we don't have time," she whispered. "We've got to play this smart." From then on, everything became a performance. Mama smiled at Omari when he dropped by, thanked him for his kindness, even let him sit at Daddy's chair during dinner once or twice. She played the role of a grateful widow while inside. Her soul burned with fury. And me, I learned to do the same, polite nods, forced smiles, even fake laughter at his corny jokes, all while my stomach knotted tighter each day. But Omari wasn't satisfied with gratitude. Gratitude wasn't enough for a man like him. He wanted ownership. He wanted control. And worst of all, he wanted Mama's hand, not out of love, but out of obsession. Every gift, every dollar, every visit was a step deeper into his web. And the scariest part? To the outside world, he looked like a hero. To everyone else, he was the man keeping us afloat. But inside our house, with every knock on the door, we knew the truth. Omari wasn't saving us. He was suffocating us. Slowly, methodically, until there was no way out. By the time the third week rolled around, I had learned to keep my phone within reach at all times. It wasn't just a lifeline anymore. It was the only connection I had left to Daddy. Every buzz meant hope. Every new message meant proof that he was still out there, somewhere, watching us, fighting for us. But this time, when it lit up, I wasn't ready for the weight of what came through. I had just come home from class at the community college, dropped my bag on the floor, and was about to help Mama prep dinner when the screen flashed. I swiped it open without hesitation. "Nova, it's time you knew the truth. Omari isn't who you think he is. He's been after this family for years. He ruined opportunities, sabotaged me, stole from me. And the worst part, the part one never wanted you to know, is that he drugged and assaulted your mama 21 years ago. You're not my blood. You're his. My stomach flipped so violently I thought I might vomit right there on the kitchen floor. I reread the words over and over, praying I had misunderstood, praying the letters would rearrange into something less horrifying. But they didn't. The message stayed the same. The truth was written plain. I stumbled into the living room, clutching the phone like it might burn a hole through my hand. Mama, my voice cracked weak and raw. Look. She took one glance, and I watched the color drain from her face. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed into Daddy's recliner, both hands pressed to her mouth. Tears streamed down instantly, but they weren't just tears of grief. They were tears of shame, of rage, of old wounds ripped wide open. It was true, she whispered, barely audible. I prayed you'd never have to know. But it was true. The world tilted sideways. Suddenly, every strange glance from Omari, every too long hug, every hungry look at Mama wasn't just uncomfortable, it was evidence. Evidence of a predator who had carved his way into our lives under the mask of family. I couldn't breathe. So, Daddy isn't. Mama reached out and grabbed my hand, her grip trembling but strong. He's your father, Nova. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. By love. He raised you. He taught you. He's your father in every way that matters. Don't you ever forget that. But the revelation still clawed at me, sinking deeper with every breath. My entire identity cracked down the middle. Omari wasn't just a threat. He was the reason I existed. Another buzz. Another message. I stayed silent to protect you. But Omari has been planning this for decades. He killed my chances at promotion, buried me in debt, and when I tried to pull away, he set me up. He's the reason I had to disappear. If he thinks I'm gone, he'll try to claim you and your mama. You must stall him. Make him believe you're on his side. I'll be back soon. Just hold on. I felt sick. My father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who bandaged my knees, who stayed up all night when I was sick, was alive, but in hiding because the man he trusted most had betrayed him. And now Omari wanted to finish what he started by replacing him in our home, in our family, and maybe even in Mama's bed. That night, Mama and I sat in the kitchen long after my brothers went to sleep. The room smelled of chamomile tea and fried chicken leftovers, but the air was heavy with dread. We can't fight him head on, Mama said, her eyes hollow but determined. If we do, he'll strike. He's already watching too closely. We have to make him think he's winning. I swallowed hard. You mean pretend? She nodded slowly. Yes, pretend. Smile when he's around. Let him think his money, his gifts, his help are working. Buy time. Just enough time for your daddy to come back. The plan made my skin crawl, but we had no choice. The next time Omari came over, Mama let him sit in Daddy's chair without protest. She laughed softly at his jokes, though I could see the pain flicker in her eyes. She even let him brush her hand once while pouring tea, though her shoulders stiffened like stone. And me, I played the dutiful goddaughter, answering his questions politely, thanking him when he slipped me gas money for school, pretending not to flinch when his gaze lingered too long. Every smile felt like acid on my face, but I forced it because Daddy's words echoed in my head. Stall him. Hold on. But it wasn't just an act anymore. Omari started to believe it. His visits grew longer. His tone grew bolder. He talked like he already lived there, like Mama was already his. One night he even joked, maybe one day, Nova, I'll be your stepdad. Wouldn't that be something? I wanted to scream, to claw the words right out of his mouth. Instead, I forced a laugh that tasted like poison, and Mama smiled through clenched teeth. Later, when he finally left, I ran to my room and collapsed on my bed, shaking so hard I couldn't hold my phone steady. That's when the next message came. You're stronger than you know. Don't give in. Every move you make is buying me time. Soon, Nova. Soon. But as I stared at those words, another thought crept in, darker than all the rest. What if he never made it back? What if we were left alone to stall forever, trapped in Omari's tightening grip, pretending to smile until there was nothing left of us to save? After that night, the silence in our house was no longer just grief. It was strategy. It was survival. Every look Mama and I shared carried a second meaning. Every smile was rehearsed. Every word was measured. We had become actresses in a play we never auditioned for, and the stage was our own living room, our own kitchen, our own lives. Omari thought he was closing in on us. He thought every thank you, every polite laugh, every small gesture of gratitude was proof that we were finally breaking, finally letting him in. What he didn't know was that it was all part of a plan, Daddy's plan. His messages had been clear. Stall him. Keep him close. Make him believe he's winning. And as much as it made our stomachs turn, we knew that was the only way to survive until Daddy could come back and finish what Omari started. The first real test came one Friday evening. Omari showed up with takeout, barbecue ribs, and cornbread from the place on Gresham Avenue Daddy used to love. He strutted in like he owned the house, dropping the bags on the counter and announcing, "Figured y'all could use a break from cooking." Mama plastered on a smile so convincing it scared me. That was thoughtful, Omari. Thank you. She set the table, even poured him a glass of sweet tea, and sat across from him as if they were sharing a date. I watched the way her eyes darted down, the way she forced her laugh when he cracked a joke. To anyone else, it might have looked like a widow warming up to her late husband's best friend. But to me, it looked like a woman biting down on her own tongue to keep from spitting venom. Later, when the boys went to bed, Omari leaned back in Daddy's chair and said it outright. "You know, Zuri, you don't have to be alone anymore. We make a good team. I've been thinking maybe it's time to make this official." Mama's face didn't falter. She smiled faintly, sipped her tea, and said, "Maybe. But I'll need time." Omari grinned like a man who had just won a prize. He had no idea that her words weren't hope, they were bait. That night, when he left, Mama locked the door and finally let herself collapse into tears. "God forgive me," she whispered, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter. "I just agreed to consider marrying the man who ruined my life." I hugged her, my own eyes stinging, but I repeated Daddy's words like a mantra. "It's not real. It's just until he comes back." From then on, the act intensified. Mama let Omari hold her hand, once when they walked down the street. She let him sit beside her at church, his arms stretched across the pew like he owned her. She even allowed him to drive her to the farmer's market, where he introduced himself to vendors as if he were her new partner. I played my part too. I smiled when he asked about school. I laughed when he told lame jokes. I thanked him when he handed me gas money. I even let him hug me sometimes, though every second of his arms around me made my skin crawl. Each time, I reminded myself, stall him. Hold on. Buy time. But it wasn't easy, because Omari was growing bolder. One night after dinner, he cornered Mama in the kitchen while I washed dishes. I heard his voice drop low. "You're beautiful, Zuri. Legend was a lucky man, but he's gone now, and you deserve someone who sees you, someone who appreciates you." Mama forced a soft laugh, but I saw her grip the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. "Thank you, Omari. You're very kind." He stepped closer, his hand brushing her arm. "I'm not being kind. I'm being honest." I dropped a plate into the sink with a crash, just to break the moment. Omari turned, eyes narrowing, but he said nothing. He left soon after, though his smile lingered like a stain. That night, Daddy's message came again. He's testing her. He wants to see how far he can push. Don't break character. Not yet. I stared at those words until my vision blurred. How much longer could we play this game before it swallowed us whole? But Mama was stronger than I'd ever known. The next day, she doubled down. She agreed to let Omari take her to dinner at a local restaurant. She even dressed up, wearing a black dress she hadn't worn since before Daddy died. She looked stunning, but I could see the steel in her eyes. "If this is what it takes to keep us safe, so be it," she said before she left. When she came home that night, she looked shaken but victorious. "He thinks he's winning," she whispered. "That's what makes him careless." And she was right. Over the next few weeks, Omari began to let pieces slip, little admissions, small boasts. He bragged about knowing details of Daddy's job no one else should have known. He hinted at debts and enemies Daddy supposedly had. He even made offhand comments about accidents and bad luck that sounded more like confessions than conversation. Each one was another crack in his mask. Each one was proof that Daddy's warning had been true. We were walking a tightrope over fire, pretending to smile while the flames licked higher. But as much as it terrified us, one thing kept us going: the knowledge that Daddy was still out there, watching, waiting. And if we could hold on just a little longer, the trap Omari thought he was setting for us would snap shut on him instead. If point 8 was a rehearsal, point 9 was the show. Omari no longer acted like a guest in our home. He behaved like he owned it. It started small, the way predators always do. First, he offered to fix the squeaky back door hinge. Then he brought over light bulbs when one of ours went out. Soon, he was keeping a set of tools in our garage like it was his personal workshop. The scariest part? Mama and I had to let him. Every time she tried to gently push back, he'd smile and say, "Legend would want me to do this for you." Every time she said we were fine, he'd lean closer and whisper, "Zuri, honey, no one's fine alone. Let me help you. Let me be the man of this house." At first, Mama deflected with polite laughter, but I could see the way her hands trembled when she dried dishes. I could hear the way her voice wavered when she said, "Thank you." Omari was circling, tightening his hold like a python. He started showing up unannounced, too. Monday afternoon, he was at the door with groceries. Wednesday morning, he pulled into the driveway just as I was leaving for class. Friday night, he strolled in with pizza boxes and enough soda for an army. No call, no text, just Omari. Always Omari. And the boys? He zeroed in on them next. "Jaden, let me help you with your homework," he'd say, pulling out a chair before Jaden even agreed. "Kingston, you know what builds character? Sports. I'll get you on the football team." Messiah, "Buddy, don't cry. Real men don't cry." Every word he spoke was a knife disguised as candy. He wasn't just trying to win over Mama. He was conditioning my brothers, shaping them, inserting himself as their father before the dust on Daddy's grave had even settled. But the worst moment came one Saturday afternoon. We were in the living room, the whole family, when Omari leaned back in Daddy's chair. His chair, the one he sat in after long days fixing roads, and said, "This is a good house, but it's falling apart. Zuri, when we get married, we'll move into my place. Better neighborhood, better schools, better everything." I froze. He hadn't said if. He said when. Mama's smile didn't falter, but I could see her nails dig into her palm. "That's a big decision, Omari. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." He chuckled like she'd made a cute joke. "I'm not ahead, sweetheart. I'm just realistic. Your boys need stability. You need security. And I've got both." That night, I wrote it all down in the little notebook I kept hidden under my mattress. Every word, every gesture, every slip of the mask. Daddy had told me to document everything, and I was determined to give him every piece of ammunition he'd need when the time came. But Omari wasn't content with just moving into our home life. He wanted to dictate finances, too. One evening, Mama sat at the table, staring at the pile of unpaid bills. Omari walked in, no knock, no warning, and plucked the electric bill from her hand. "Final notice, huh? Don't worry. I'll cover it. In fact, from now on, why don't you let me handle all the bills? Legend always struggled with money. That doesn't have to be your problem anymore." Mama's jaw clenched, but she forced another smile. "That's generous of you, Omari, but I think I can manage." "No, Zuri," he said firmly, placing the bill back down like he was slamming a gavel. "I don't think you can. And that's not an insult, that's reality. You need me. And sooner you accept that, the better off you'll all be." I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the bill out of his hand and throw him out into the street. But I remembered Daddy's words: stall him. Keep him talking. Make him think he's in control. So I sat there silent, my fists clenched in my lap, as Omari played king of our household. But even kings get arrogant. Even predators grow careless. It was late one night when I caught him again in Daddy's office. He was rifling through the filing cabinet this time, not just the desk drawer. When he saw me, he didn't even flinch. He smiled. "Your mama's not very organized," he said smoothly. "I'm just trying to put things in order before we make this official." "Official?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He smiled wider. "Marriage. Adoption papers. You'll see. It's all going to come together soon." And then he added, almost as an afterthought, your daddy would be proud of me for stepping up. That was the moment I knew he wasn't just playing house. He wasn't just hovering like a moth around a flame. He was rewriting history in his own mind, casting himself as the rightful head of our family. But I also noticed something else that night. He wasn't just rummaging. He was searching. His eyes scanned each folder too fast for him to actually be reading. He was looking for something specific, something Daddy had left behind. And in that instant, it clicked. Daddy's earlier warning, evidence coming soon. Don't let her marry him. Omari wasn't just trying to control us. He was hunting for proof that Daddy was alive. Proof that would unravel his entire scheme. For the first time in weeks, fear gave way to something stronger. Determination. Because now I knew Omari wasn't the only one running out of time. By the time autumn crept in, the mask Omari wore had nearly fused to his face. To outsiders, he looked like a grieving best friend stepping up to care for a broken family. To us, he was a spider spinning a web tighter and tighter with every passing day. The worst part? People started to believe the performance. Neighbors stopped by less and less. Church members nodded approvingly when Omari walked us to the pews. Even Mama's own sister whispered one afternoon, maybe it's God's way of giving you a second chance. But Mama and I knew the truth. And the truth was, Omari wasn't satisfied with whispers or assumptions. He wanted a declaration. He wanted ownership. And he picked the most public, humiliating way to demand it. It happened on a Sunday. Church service was packed, every pew filled with families in their best clothes, the choir's voices rising like thunder. After the benediction, as people milled about shaking hands and exchanging hugs, Omari cleared his throat loudly at the front of the sanctuary. Excuse me, everybody, he called out, his voice booming. Conversations died down. Heads turned. My stomach dropped. Mama froze beside me, clutching her Bible so tightly the cover bent. Omari smiled like a showman. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, dropped to one knee, and opened it to reveal a ring that sparkled under the church lights. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Zuri, he said, his voice dripping with false tenderness, I've loved you for years. Legend was my brother, and losing him nearly destroyed me. But I promised I'd take care of you and these kids. And now, I want to make that promise official. Marry me, Zuri. Let me give you the life you deserve. The sanctuary erupted in whispers. Some people smiled, some clapped, others looked on with wide eyes, waiting for her answer. Mama's face was pale, her lips trembling. I could see the storm raging inside her, grief, fury, fear. But she remembered the plan. She remembered Daddy's messages. She forced a small, tight smile and said softly, Omari, I need time. The crowd murmured again, some with disappointment, others with sympathy. But Omari's smile didn't falter. He stood, slipped the box back into his pocket, and kissed her hand. Take all the time you need, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm not going anywhere. The church clapped anyway, as if her non-answer was close enough to a yes. My stomach churned. That night, after the boys went to bed, Omari lingered in our living room, sipping sweet tea and smirking like a man who had just secured victory. Mama sat stiffly across from him, her Bible clutched like a weapon. I sat on the armrest, my phone hidden in my lap, waiting, praying for another message from Daddy. That's when Omari leaned forward, his smile fading into something darker. His voice dropped low, meant only for us. You know, Zuri, he said, swirling the ice in his glass. Legend wasn't the man everyone thought he was. Mama's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Omari chuckled. He had debts, enemies. He wasn't strong enough to handle them. That's why he leaned on me. That's why he always needed me. And in the end, he leaned closer, his eyes glinting. In the end, maybe it's better this way. Some men aren't built to last. Some men have to fall so stronger ones can take their place. My chest tightened. He wasn't just insulting Daddy. He was admitting something. Mama's voice was steady, but her hand trembled on the Bible. What are you saying, Omari? He smiled again, sharp and cold. I'm saying everything happens for a reason. Legend's gone. I'm here. That's the reason. Don't fight it. Accept it. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to scream, to throw his glass in his face, to tell him I knew the truth, that Daddy was alive, that his lies would catch up to him. But Mama's hand touched mine under the table, a silent plea. Not yet. When Omari finally left that night, Mama collapsed into Daddy's recliner, shaking. He's telling us what he did, she whispered, piece by piece. And if we're not careful, he'll convince the world it was all just fate. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. He's trying to rewrite the story. Don't let him. Soon, Nova. Very soon. For the first time, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt rage, because Omari wasn't just circling anymore. He was declaring war, and he thought he'd already won. But he hadn't counted on one thing. Daddy was still alive, and he was coming back. The night it all came to a head started like any other. Omari was in our living room again, sprawled across Daddy's chair with his legs stretched wide, sipping sweet tea like it was his throne. My brother sat on the floor playing a board game, too young to see the danger in the way his eyes kept flicking between Mama and me. Mama was in the kitchen, quietly stirring a pot of collard greens, her face blank, but her hands moving fast, like she was trying to keep her rage from boiling over. I sat on the couch, notebook hidden beneath a cushion, recording every word, every look, every slip of the mask. Daddy's last message had been short, urgent, tonight. Stay ready. My heart pounded with every tick of the clock. Omari cleared his throat and set his glass down. Zuri, he said, his voice smooth but sharp underneath. I think we've played this long enough. The boys need stability. Nova needs guidance. You need a man. It's time you stop pretending and admit what we both know. You're mine now. Mama froze, wooden spoon clutched in her hand. She turned slowly, her face calm but her eyes blazing. And if I say no? Omari chuckled. You won't. You can't. Where else are you going to go, Zuri? Who else is paying your bills, keeping your lights on, putting food on the table? Your husband's gone. I'm here. That's the end of it. Silence swallowed the room. My brother stopped playing. Mama set the spoon down gently, her lips parting as if to answer. But before she could, the front door creaked open. Every head turned, and there he was, Daddy, Legend Matthews. He looked different, thinner, harder, like a man who had been running for his life. His clothes were plain, his boots dusty, his face shadowed with stubble. But his eyes, those eyes were the same. Fierce, unbroken, alive. For a moment, the world stopped. My brothers gasped. Mama's hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling instantly. I couldn't breathe. Omari, though Omari didn't gasp. He didn't cry. He didn't even look surprised. His face twisted into something darker, something raw. Well, he said, his voice low, dangerous. Ain't this something? Daddy stepped forward, his voice steady. Get out of my chair. Omari laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the walls. Your chair? You were supposed to be dead. Legend. That was the deal. That was the plan. You don't get to walk back in here and take it all back. My heart dropped. He'd admitted it. Not just to us, but out loud in front of everyone. Daddy's fists clenched. You tried to take everything from me. My family, my name, my life. But I'm still here. And you're done. Omari stood, slow and deliberate. He was taller, broader, but Daddy's presence filled the room like a storm. You can't stop me, Omari hissed. I've been part of this family longer than you've been strong enough to hold it together. Zuri needs me. Nova. His eyes cut to me, hungry, poisonous. She's mine by blood. You can't change that. Rage exploded in my chest. You're nothing to me, I spat. My voice shook, but it was loud, clear. You'll never be my father. You'll never be part of this family. You're just a coward who hides behind lies. Daddy's voice thundered over mine. You laid your hands on my wife. You stole from me. You tried to erase me. And now you think you can stand here and claim what isn't yours? Not today. Omari's smile faltered. For the first time, he looked uncertain. That's when Daddy pulled something from his jacket, a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the coffee table, papers spilling across the wood. Proof, he said simply. Bank records. Signed statements. Witness accounts. Everything you did, Omari. Every debt you pushed on me. Every lie you spread. Every hand you played in trying to make me disappear. It's all here. Mama gasped, covering her mouth. My brothers stared wide-eyed. I leaned forward, seeing the papers marked with signatures, police letterheads, documents I didn't fully understand, but knew were real. Omari's face twisted with panic, then fury. You think some papers are enough to stop me? I built this family while you were gone. They're mine now. No, Mama said firmly, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. We were never yours. Not then. Not now. Not ever. Omari's eyes burned with hatred. He lunged, but Daddy moved faster. In an instant, he grabbed Omari by the collar and slammed him back against the wall. The picture frames rattled, the boys screamed, and Mama shouted, but Daddy's voice cut through it all. You wanted me gone, but I'm still here. You wanted my family, but they'll never be yours. You wanted to erase me, but all you did was prove how weak you are. Omari struggled, his face red, his hands clawing at Daddy's grip. But Daddy didn't let go until Omari sagged, gasping, beaten not by fists, but by truth. Finally, Daddy shoved him toward the door. Get out. And if you ever step foot near this house again, I won't need papers to bury you. Omari stumbled into the night, his shadow swallowed by the darkness. For the first time in weeks, the house was quiet. But this time, it wasn't fear that filled the silence. It was relief. It was victory. It was the sound of chains breaking. Mama fell into Daddy's arms, sobbing into his chest. My brothers rushed forward, clinging to his legs, crying, laughing, shouting all at once. And me, I stood frozen, tears streaming down my face, staring at the man I thought I'd lost forever. I told you, Daddy whispered when he finally pulled me into his arms. I'm not dead. I'm still alive. Before I tell you how it ended, do me one thing. Lean in with me right now. If you've ridden every mile of this road with us, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me your country in the comments so I know where my people are listening from. Because what happened next isn't just an ending, it's a warning, a prayer, and a promise all rolled into one. The night Daddy came home and Omari staggered out into the dark, our house exhaled for the first time in months. The walls, those same old walls that had absorbed years of laughter, arguments, and lullabies, finally heard the truth spoken out loud. But peace doesn't arrive just because you open the door. It has to be escorted in, documented, signed, stamped, archived. Daddy knew that. He hadn't just come back with arms ready to protect us. He came back with receipts. The envelope he threw on the table wasn't just paper. It was a map of a monster's footprints. Copy after copy, forged emails, burner phone logs, photographs of Omari with men he swore he didn't know, notes from a private investigator who tracked him crossing state lines to visit families who later suffered accidents. There were banking records showing deposits to Omari's accounts right after insurance payouts from those tragedies. There was a full chain of text backups, dates, times, cell tower pings, showing how he baited and charmed women at the precise moment they were most vulnerable. And tucked in the back, like a final nail, were reports tying him to the mechanic who'd serviced Daddy's car 2 days before the crash that wasn't a crash. Loosened components, fuel line anomalies, a ghost signature on the invoice. Daddy had been collecting for months. While we mourned a ghost, he built a case. We didn't sleep that night. Daddy called Detective Santos, the one he'd quietly vetted, the one not owned by Omari's friends. By sunrise, our living room looked like a temporary field office. Voice recorders lined up with fresh batteries, our old coffee table cleared to sort exhibits, a little mountain of USB drives and labeled manila folders. Mama brewed a pot of her strong black tea, the kind that wakes grief and courage at the same time, and sat beside Daddy, shoulder to shoulder, like the day they signed their marriage license. Only now this was a license to live free. Santos arrived with 2 officers who didn't blink at the late hour. She didn't come to hear us out. She came to work. Evidence logged. Chain of custody forms signed. Statements recorded. She asked tight, surgical questions, and Daddy answered with dates and times like a metronome. When it was my turn, I opened my notebook and read every ugly detail I'd been writing under my mattress. The The way Omari stood too close, the lines he used on my brothers, the exact sentences from the church proposal, the coffee shop implication. Some men have to fall so stronger ones can take their place. Every predatory phrase he thought sounded like destiny. And Mama, Lord Mama, she told the truth from 21 years ago. The wine. The split-second fuzz before the curtain fell over her memory. The pregnancy that arrived with a knot of dread she could never untie. How legend found the truth and chose love over rage so that I could grow up whole, even if the story behind me was broken. There are testimonies that land soft, and there are testimonies that land like thunder. Mama shook the room. By noon, Santos had enough to move. Warrants. A quiet pickup at Omari's place, so there would be no theatrics, no performance, no last-minute accident. They took him without the camera smile he'd practiced all his life. He finally couldn't sell his version of reality to a uniform that wasn't buying. The days after that blurred. Formal interviews, safe house check-ins, because predators don't just lose, they thrash, and the kind of silence in our house that felt earned, not forced. Daddy stayed. I'd catch him sometimes in the doorway of our boys' room, just watching them breathe, memorizing the rise and fall like he was storing oxygen for later. Mama slept for the first time in months. I did, too. When the trial came, people showed up. Not for Omari, he had always worked in the shadows, but for the women whose names were stitched into the case file like a quilt of grief. Toledo, Cleveland, Indianapolis, widows and daughters who had wondered if they were crazy for years. We weren't crazy. We were correct. Watching them sit behind the rail with us, holding hands across separate lives, I realized monsters don't just hunt families, they hunt patterns. Omari had been repeating a script, and we, finally, had torn up the last page. The prosecution didn't need fireworks. They had structure, digital forensics, the mechanic's sworn statement, the DNA report archived all these years, the wire audio Daddy captured when Omari's confidence bloated into confession, and my mother's courage sharpened to a point. The defense tried the same old tricks, grieving friend, misunderstood intentions, coincidences and hard times, but lies wilt under sustained daylight. After 9 days of testimony and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury came back like a door slamming shut. Guilty on attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, unlawful surveillance, and a stack of other charges that would keep him staring at gray walls long after our grandchildren learned to ride bikes. The judge read the sentence with a spine. Life without parole, plus time that stacked like bricks, like the weight he had tried to hang on our lives. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at me. The same hungry claim he'd worn my entire life flickered once and died. I didn't flinch. I chose my father with my eyes. Here's the part nobody tells you about justice. It doesn't restore time. It blesses the time to come. Daddy didn't go back to the city job. He said he'd given Detroit his back and his bones. Now he was going to give it strategy. He took a portion of money we never expected to see. Yes, the inheritance my grandmother left like a late-in-life apology and seeded a foundation in Mama's name. The Zuri Fund pays off hidden traps, lapse policies, utility arrears, first and last month's rent for women ready to leave. It puts private investigators on retainer for families who feel watched but can't prove it yet. It provides secure phones, doorbell cameras, and the legal retainers predators count on you not affording. Mama expanded her tea stand into a storefront that smells like sanctuary. She still blends peppermint and chamomile, but now the back shelves hold pamphlets for shelters, legal clinics, therapists who understand trauma that arrives wearing a friendly face. Women come for tea and leave with a plan. That's ministry. My brothers healed loud. Jaden joined debate and learned how to argue facts until lies ran out of breath. Kingston sprinted onto the soccer field like he was outrunning every shadow we ever lived under and scored like the goal was freedom. Little Messiah, who isn't so little anymore, started asking the kind of questions detectives ask, the kind that keep families safer simply because they got asked in time. And me, I chose to study the mind, what breaks it, what mends it, and what grows in the cracks that survive the storm. Trauma counseling isn't glamorous. It's one chair, one box of tissues, one human who needs someone to believe them. I believe you. I know what it's like to be gaslit by a smiling man while a whole neighborhood nods along. I know what it's like to learn that the blood in your veins began with violence and still decide your soul will be authored by love. Do I think about biology? Yes. I think about it the way a gardener thinks about old soil, something that can be amended, renewed, overcome with new seed and stubborn sun. Blood is a fact. Family is a decision you keep making. Every morning I wake up and choose the man who changed my diapers, who taught me to side-eye promises that arrived too slick, who burned his fear down to ash and came home holding proof. I choose the woman who carried both me and her grief, who weaponized her truth in a courtroom, and then went back to blending teas like they were prayers. I choose these boys who became men in the space between two door slams, the one where Omari left and the one where the cell closed. People ask about forgiveness. Let me be clear. Forgiveness is not parole. It is not a welcome mat rolled back out for a wolf. Forgiveness, if it ever comes at all, will be a quiet boundary inside my own heart. Justice does not require my softness, it required my testimony. And I gave it. If you're listening to this and your skin prickles because something in your life suddenly looks familiar, if the helpful friend knows too much about your bills, if the man at the edge of your grief is already planning your future, if your gut has been whispering and you've been shushing it, listen to me now. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Screenshot. Journal. Tell one person who is not charmed by him. Love may be blind. Safety shouldn't be. My name is Nova Matthews. My father is Legend Matthews, by choice, by action, by 1,000 small mercies that stacked high enough to build a life. My mother is Zuri, herbalist, truth teller, survivor. We are not the family Omari tried to draft. We are the family we chose to be again and again until the choosing itself became our home. And if you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were my mama? Hold on and play the part to draw the monster into the light, or walk away and rebuild from nothing. Have you ever been betrayed by the friend everyone else applauded? Drop your story if you're comfortable. Your words might be the warning someone else needs tonight. Tap like, hit subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Not because I need numbers, because I need to know where my voice can reach. Somewhere out there, a woman is standing in her living room, hearing a knock at a door that should not open, and wondering if she's overreacting. She's not. Send her this. Send her us. Trust carefully. Love fiercely. Choose your family every day.